You ever start a game hoping it will be your next obsession, only to see its potential undermined by execution? That's how it went for me. I've spent many hours exploring Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, diving deep into its world, story and systems. Unfortunately, a game-breaking bug stopped me cold before Act 3. But by that point, still, I saw enough to share a fair and deep look at what this game really offers. So while this isn't a full completion review, it's a well-informed one. Here's what you can expect from the game and whether it's worth your time. Tainted Grail is a first-person indie RPG set across 3 large open-world maps. Set long after the Age of Arthur, the game reimagines the lingering legacy of Camelot in a grim, fractured world, unfolding over 3 story-driven acts. The game blends wide exploration, hidden secrets, side quests, NPC stories and challenging encounters into a gritty open-world experience. The game is built in Unity, and from the very first moments you are greeted by a world drenched in dark, grounded colors and heavy volumetric lighting. The tone is unmistakably grim. Your initial escape from the prison sets the mood immediately. Tortured prisoners line the halls and piles of decaying corpses are dumped unceremoniously through a bloody disposal shaft. It's bleak, it's heavy, and it's exactly what the game wants you to feel. The world design blends multiple influences in an interesting way. While the game is firmly rooted in dark fantasy, its landscapes, the foggy highlands, coastal cliffs and weathered hills evoke a more traditional medieval setting, infused with Arthurian folklore. You will encounter menhirs, druidic ritual sites and creatures inspired by Celtic and British mythology. Much of the world sticks to grounded medieval fantasy. But in nearly every region there's 1 or 2 standout locations that shift the tone dramatically. These areas often feel more spacious or imposing than the standard crypts and tunnels, featuring multi-tiered structures and haunting layouts that echo the spatial storytelling of Dark Souls games. They are not frequent, but when they appear, they linger. And while those moments lean into gothic atmosphere, the game occasionally pushes even further, into something far stranger. Take the tutorial for example. King Arthur's tomb isn't some mossy ruin, it's a blood-slicked chamber of black torn stone ringed by warped organic walls and dominated by a towering figure holding a grail. The architecture is surreal and anatomical, closer to H.R. Geiger than medieval Britain. Later in the main story, it leads you through a corridor filled with biomechanical cocoons. Flashly silhouettes float in amber sacks, embedded in what looks like organic-shaped walls straight out of a sci-fi horror novel. These aren't random deviations. They are rare, deliberate ruptures in the game's usual aesthetic. And when Tainted Grail does break from folklore into sci-fi horror, it does so with intent and impact. Visually, the environments are varied and often stunning from a distance. You will see scenic shorelines, windswept grasslands, crumbling medieval tower on cliffs and quiet coastal villages. Water effects and underwater segments look surprisingly good with decent wave physics and lighting. But once you realize there is no danger beneath the surface, the tension fades. The sea becomes beautiful but lifeless. On a technical level, the game does show its indie roots. Asset quality is decent, but repetition is noticeable. The same rocks appear in different formations frequently, and some beach textures feel overly tiled, better suited to underwater scenes than exposed sand. Creature models are serviceable but clearly not AAA quality. Some animations feel stiff or artificial. That said, they function well enough and don't break immersion. Rain affects terrain specularity nicely, with muddy areas forming convincing reflective puddles that enhance the atmosphere. Building textures, on the other hand, can feel flat and outdated, especially compared to games leveraging high-end photogrammetry like Megascans. Despite those limitations, the game often looks far better than its technical specs suggest. That's thanks in large part to Unity's volumetric lighting and the excellent use of dynamic weather and day-night cycles. When the rising sun cuts across a field of swaying corn, or the eerie yellow glow of a vivid night bathes the world in alien light, the visuals come together with a soundtrack to create moments of genuine mood and beauty. Even the minimalist minimap struck a good balance. It's abstract enough to avoid clutter, but precise enough to always give you a sense of direction. Not everything works in all conditions. In diffuse midday light without strong shadows, some textures appear flat and the overall visual fidelity feels closer to a 2016 title than a modern release, but even then the atmosphere holds. The soundtrack hit quite a few soft spots for me. Some of the ambient tracks reminded me of the Diablo 1 town theme, low, moody and melancholic, while other moments carried that ancient, haunting vibe you might recall from encountering the 3 hags in the swamps of The Witcher 3. At times, it's simple highland ambience, at others, it leans into something darker and more mysterious. It doesn't sound like it was recorded by the full symphonic orchestra. You can tell it was produced digitally, but for me, it still worked. It supported the atmosphere well and added to the game's emotional weight where it mattered. In short, the technical limitations are clear, but the ambience is undeniable. Tainted Grail delivers a cohesive and often captivating dark fantasy world through mood, tone and lighting, despite the visual shortcuts it sometimes takes. The game features a fully voiced narrative spread across dozens of NPCs, each with their own little backstories and side quests. The voice acting is generally well done, with many characters brought to life through accent-rich performances that add personality and regional flavor to the world. A central main quest guides you through the story's 3 chapters, but along the way you will encounter a vast number of side quests. If you take the time to engage with them, they add a lot of depth to your journey through Avalon and its fractured version of Camelot. Without spoiling anything, I found the storyline surprisingly engaging and exciting to follow. What stood out to me in particular is a variety of NPC design. The game mixes more traditional quest givers similar to those you would find in other RPGs, with strange cryptic figures found in more exotic locations, who feel like they walked straight out of a Dark Souls game. These mysterious entities contribute as much to the world's atmosphere as they do to its narrative, blending storytelling with world building in a way that makes the game feel both grounded and otherworldly. The Fall of Avalon offers 3 fully explorable open-world zones, each unlocked progressively as you advance the main story. These regions are filled with hidden locations, instance dungeons and handcrafted caves, many of which include their own small story elements or environmental narratives. Impressively, most of these locations feel distinct rather than copy-pasted, which adds a lot of texture to the world. Exploration is not only encouraged but rewarded. Each unique area you uncover often grants meaningful loot, whether it's new weapons, armor pieces or a spell. Enemies tend to respawn over time in the open world, but they don't level scale in a traditional sense. Instead, tougher enemy types appear the deeper you push into the world, giving exploration a clear sense of progression without undermining your build. A standout system is the wyrd night mechanic. When night falls, the moon turns yellow, the music becomes eerie and you encounter shadowy specters haunting the lands. Defeating enemies during this time grants you a special currency, which can be used to identify rare items or fuel fast travel campfires. It's designed as a risk-reward system and adds a strong atmospheric layer to nighttime exploration. That said, the night significantly reduces visibility. Even if you are tempted to hunt the more rewarding enemies early on, I found it much better to explore new locations for the first time during the day. Otherwise, you will likely miss important visual details and leave behind hidden loot or paths simply because you couldn't see them. All in all, exploration is one of the game's strongest points. Every zone feels worth poking into, and there's a real sense of satisfaction from slowly completing every corner of the map. For an indie title, the combat system is surprisingly dynamic. At its core, it's a mix of melee, ranged and spell-based combat, featuring weapons like swords, spears, bows and wands, alongside a variety of spells with different effects. You have 2 standard dashes on a cooldown, plus a shorter emergency dash if both are on cooldown, balanced by enemies that often hit quite hard and force you to stay alert. While it doesn't reach the mechanical precision of games like Darktide, Monster Hunter or Elden Ring, the combat still feels quick and impactful. Your attacks are manually aimed, requiring proper spacing and positioning to connect, which adds a degree of tension and skill to every encounter. At times, hit detection can feel slightly off, but not enough to ruin the experience. Status effects play a significant role. Some spells or weapons can freeze enemies completely, deal massive damage over time, or can slow enemies to a crawl. Ranged enemies are particularly dangerous if ignored, especially archers who can be hard to spot and deal massive damage if left unchecked. In short, the combat may not be ultra polished, but for the scale of this game it works well. It's responsive, tactical and has enough variation to stay engaging across dozens of hours. Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, builds its progression system around 5 core pillars: your stats, attributes, skill trees, the king's soul, and of course your equipment. Let's start with the stats. These are your core gameplay skills. Things like one-handed weapons, blocking, athletics, sneaking, evasion, magic, and so on. They level up passively, similar to Skyrim. The more you use a particular ability, the higher that skill becomes. However, the feedback here is weak. Aside from vague descriptions like you deal slightly more damage, the game doesn't clearly communicate how each stat actually impacts gameplay. You can't manually allocate points or meaningfully interact with these stats beyond leveling them by doing related actions. As a result, they often feel disconnected from your build. I never had a moment where my high sneak or swordsmanship levels felt impactful or game-changing, except perhaps in crafting. The quality of food, potions and similar items does seem to scale with skill level, which is a small but notable touch. These stats are visually grouped under their corresponding attributes, strength, dexterity and so on, but this seems to be purely cosmetic. There's no actual mechanical connection between a stat and the attributes it's listed under. Next are the attributes, and here the system shines a bit more. You will find familiar options like strength, endurance and dexterity alongside less common ones like spirituality, practicality and perception. Each attribute subtly modifies certain stats, and while the changes are modest, they do add up over time and meaningfully influence your playstyle. For example, dexterity increases both critical hit chance and critical damage, while endurance boosts your maximum health and carrying capacity, giving all attributes meaningful value across a wide range of builds. Then we have the skill trees, which are also sorted by attribute, but again, there's no real dependency between the tree's effects and the attributes it's grouped under. Each attribute has about 3 or 4 themed trees that enhance different gameplay styles. Two-handed weapons, shields, stamina, bows, mobility, wands, cubes, summoning, crafting, armor, you name it. There's even a hidden skill tree unlocked through a side quest, which I won't spoil here, and a King's Soul system, a special bullet time-like ability introduced early in the game that can be upgraded through the main quest line. In terms of actual build crafting, it's really the attributes and skill trees that carry the system. These are the parts that shape your character's identity and define how you play. The trees include a mix of filler and highly impactful nodes. Some passive bonuses feel borderline useless, while others are outright overpowered. In many cases, certain builds only become viable once you have unlocked the key skill nodes. For example, shields feel almost irrelevant until you have invested in the right tree. After that, it's a night and day difference. Respecking is possible but limited. You will occasionally find origin potions, items used to reset your build, but by the end of chapter 2 I had only found about 8, assuming I didn't miss any from vendors. This means you can respec but not frequently. It's not the kind of system where you can casually reassign 3 points every 30 minutes. It's more like once you're deep into the game and decide you want to switch from a sword and board fighter to an archer, you will have a handful of chances to make that change. If attributes and skill trees represent one half of your build customization in Tainted Grail, then your equipment makes up the other half. The game gives you 9 gear slots, each capable of significantly influencing your stats, along with 4 weapon sets. Each weapon slot can hold either a two-handed weapon or a combination of one-handed items, offering flexibility. You can freely swap weapons mid-combat and access your menu or use potions at any time during battle, allowing for adaptable playstyles or on-the-fly adjustments. To put it simply, the equipment system feels solid. There's a satisfying variety of gear that can strongly impact your stats. Whether you're building around stealth, critical hits, maximum health, mana regeneration or unique item effects. For a single player title that isn't designed as a live service loot grind, the amount of viable equipment options is surprisingly generous. One of the more rewarding moments early on is finding gear that boosts your mana regeneration. With the right equipment set, your spellcasting capacity can suddenly skyrocket. From being able to cast just a few spells per fight to chain casting entire encounters. That kind of progression feels impactful. That said, the game does a poor job of explaining how equipment weight and vendor prices impact gameplay. 2 systems that can quietly make your life miserable if ignored. Like I imagine many of you guys do, I initially focused my stat points entirely on combat effectiveness, prioritizing magic to get through the tougher early fights. In doing so, I completely neglected the weight and economy systems. As a result, a frustrating gameplay loop where I could barely carry a handful of items before becoming encumbered. I had to run back to town constantly just to sell junk and make room again. That gets old fast. Later, once I invested in endurance, I realized how much smoother things could have been. Equipment weight scales with the stat, and even a few points drastically improve inventory management. The same goes for vendor prices. By default, you can only sell items for 10% of their actual value. However, every point you invest in practicality or in the base trading node within the skill tree increases that rate by 10%. That means a single point immediately doubles your profits. 4 points increase your earnings 5-fold, and if you add 9 points, you will hit 100%, selling items at full value. Beyond that point, further investment suffers from diminishing returns, but up to the 100% mark, every point provides a huge boost in income. The system is generous, but only if you know it exists. The game never properly explains this, and it led me halfway through the campaign wondering why the economy felt so punishing. The answer? My own build choices. Don't make the same mistake. Drop a few early points into practicality and endurance. You will still beat the enemies and your journey will be far smoother. As for magic, the initial promise feels broad. At first glance, there appears to be a wide range of spells and tools, but as you progress, you will find that only a handful of spells are truly viable. Some are dramatically stronger than the rest, reducing most of your arsenal to a gimmicks or dead weight. The imbalance is so steep that by mid-game you might find yourself using the same 1 or 2 spells for nearly every encounter. Trying to branch out often just means gimping yourself. Summoning, however, is an exception. It steadily evolves throughout the game. You won't find a single summon to carry you from start to finish. Instead, you will unlock new summoning tools every few hours, giving you a sense of progression and variety that many other spell types lack. Then there's the game's unique mechanic, magic wands and magic cubes. These are offhand tools and complement your primary spellcasting. Wands function similarly to melee weapons like maces, but come with innate bonuses. Some enhance spell power, others reduce mana cost, depending on your setup. Cubes are trigger-based devices that activate under certain conditions and offer additional effects. There's even a full skill tree dedicated to these 2 equipment options. In theory, this system allows for deep build crafting. You could design a high crit mage build focused on burst damage instead of regeneration, relying on a wand that slashes your mana costs. But in practice, by the time you have enough gear and points to experiment with these systems properly, most enemies are already so weak that it barely matters. The opportunity for clever builds is there, but the challenge level rarely pushes you to make use of it. Which brings us to the next point: difficulty. Avalon offers 3 basic difficulty modes, with Veteran being the hardest plus an optional survival setting that limits you to a single save file. I chose Veteran mode without survival enabled, and what followed was a familiar experience found in many single-player RPGs. A game that feels difficult early on but quickly becomes far too easy once your build starts coming together. It's a question that keeps popping up in forums and discussions. Who is responsible for the challenge in single-player games? Some argue it's up to the player to avoid overpowered builds if they want meaningful difficulty. Others feel it's a developer's job to design a balanced game where even optimized characters face real danger and discovery. I get it. I've had those moments too, where your build finally clicks and suddenly you are tearing through everything like a god. That kind of power can be fun. In bursts. But if the entire game turns into a one-sided stomp and never fights back, the tension just fades. I know some players enjoy cruising once they are fully optimized, but for me, if build efficiency alone erases all sense of challenge, danger or discovery, then the magic is gone. The world stops feeling alive. When I find a legendary sword in a crypt, I want that to feel like a reward, not a reason to start deliberately handicapping myself just to keep the enemies alive. And if veteran difficulty still feels like a kindergarten mode after a few hours of smart character building, something is off. So where does Fall of Avalon fall on this spectrum? The early game on veteran is actually quite solid. Enemies hit hard and getting surrounded can be deadly. Bosses in particular can feel overwhelming at first. I remember my first encounter with an ogre nearly one-shotting me, forcing me to kite and dodge constantly just to stay alive. That tension felt rewarding. The first few hours gave me the best overall challenge in the entire playthrough. However, as I progressed through Act 1, the difficulty began to slip. Midway through the act, enemies started dying far too easily. I had a brief moment of thinking, wait, is that it? Thankfully, the game did pick up again toward the end of Act 1, with a few tougher fights, especially during the main story beats. Act 2 opened strong. Enemies hit even harder, and I encountered a nighttime boss encounter I won't spoil, one that essentially told me, come back when you are stronger. That was a great moment. It gave me something to look forward to and a reason to grow. But soon after, the balance tipped. As you gain access to more attributes, skill points and high impact gear, the power spike hits fast. Suddenly everything started clicking. Stronger spells, better stats and optimized gear combined to obliterate most threats instantly. Enemies could still deal damage if they landed a hit, but in most cases they never got the chance. I was wiping out groups in seconds, and even bosses became trivial. Many were fully vulnerable to status effects, with only a few rare exceptions. The second half of Act 2 felt like I was just steamrolling through. No tension, no real resistance, just a rush through dungeon after dungeon, as if the game had quietly given up trying to stop me. To summarize, the game starts off strong with a real challenge and a sense of danger. But as soon as your build hits its stride, that feeling fades fast. While there's a decent variety of build options, the game's difficulty scaling doesn't keep up. By the time you have the tools to really enjoy theory crafting, most enemies are too weak to matter. I would have loved to see if Act 3 introduced tougher enemies or new spells to shake things up, but due to a game-breaking main story bug, I couldn't progress further without rolling back over 15 hours of gameplay. A reset I wasn't willing to make at this stage. Which brings me to the next point, the technical state of the game. To put it bluntly, Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon is in a rough shape technically. From small design missteps to game-breaking bugs, the issues pile up quickly. There's a useful shield spell that creates a massive intrusive visual effect that dominates the screen. It's a kind of thing that could easily be toned down with an opacity mask or limited to screen edges, but instead it constantly blocks your visibility during combat. It's a frustrating oversight. Even basic quality of life features are missing. You can't click on quest markers on the map to set an active quest. It's minor, but it adds up, especially when it feels like the sort of thing every RPG should include by now. Then there is the summoning system. I love summoning mechanics in games, and very few titles have captured that feeling of commanding a small army since City of Heroes Mastermind class back in 2005. Here you can build a 5 summon team, and at its best, it feels great. But sadly, the bugs surrounding summoning are among the worst in the game. Summons sometimes go rogue, attacking NPCs randomly, even merchants, causing quest failures or ruining access to key vendors. Their movement AI is also a mess. They frequently shove you around, push you off cliffs, block doorways or pop up directly in front of you when running through open terrain. It's like having a team of bodyguards with no spatial awareness, and it can absolutely break immersion or even get you killed. What ultimately ended my playthrough was a game-breaking bug at the end of Act 2. I had unknowingly killed a story-critical boss before progressing the main quest to that point. When I later triggered the associated quest, it broke. My only option was to roll back over 15 hours of gameplay, which I wasn't willing to do. And that was the moment the game lost me. And yeah, I was frustrated. I was enjoying the game despite the issues. And it really sucked to hit a dead end after investing so much time. I could have lived with the physics glitches and summon pathing, but when the main quest broke entirely due to a sequence logic, that's what ended it for me. I had originally planned to create additional content, skill tree guides, spell breakdowns, maybe even a couple of build videos, but after that bug and after realizing how much of my enjoyment was being eroded by technical issues, I just didn't feel motivated to continue. It's hard not to respect the passion and ambition behind projects like this, especially when they come from small indie teams. And at its core, Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon is a bold, atmospheric RPG with parts of it being truly special. My personal gripes about spell diversity or scaling difficulty might not apply to everyone, but the technical state, that's harder to ignore. With progression-breaking bugs and immersion-shattering AI, it simply doesn't feel ready for release. I wanted to keep playing, I really did. In the end, I stopped because the game broke. And that says something. The world and exploration are really fun and rewarding. The tone, the music and the immersive atmosphere can really catch you sometimes. The progression systems have a lot of tools that are fun to play around with. When it all clicks, it really clicks. If the devs fix the core issues, I would absolutely consider coming back for a revisit with a build-focused deep dive or a skill tree analysis or a spell breakdown. So if you're someone who can overlook rough edges in favor of raw ambition or just want to support a passionate small team, you might still find a shiny gem buried under a heap of broken systems and dust. Just go in with your eyes open. And if you enjoy content like this, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps a lot so I can keep exploring ambitious games like this.